You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
Hello.
Hello.
We're back. We had more time off than usual for things.
I know. I was going to start by asking what day it is.
What day is it? It's Sunday today.
No, it isn't.
It is. No, it's not. It's Saturday. It's Saturday, the 6th of February. You are in Rivendell. The time is 11:22. If you would like to know.
11:42.
No, I'm joking. No.
Is that a joke from something?
It's me being a nerd and trying to quote Lord of the Rings. Yeah. You're not nerdy, I know.
What? I mean, I would never say that. Yeah, it's been one of those weeks. It's been a week. It's been a week. Went to hospital for suspected appendicitis. Turns out it wasn't. Turns out I'm fine. That was exciting. You know, a friend said to me today, I heard about your cry for help. He said it with such a straight face. I was like, yeah. And he's like, you know, you can just say, if you need time off, just say. And I reflected back on it and I was like, like, you know, I was poked and prodded quite a lot in the hospital, but there also was a side of it that was just really great.
Can I remind you as well, though, that the last podcast we recorded, you started with, I have that thing where I'd like to be in an accident.
Oh my God. Do you think I should say sorry to the NHS? Do you think I should write a letter? No, I wasn't faking it. I was in a lot of pain and the doctor did check me out. Like I wasn't faking it. I wasn't doing the whole I'm really ill. Although maybe I was a bit psychologically, I don't know. But the things I enjoyed about it were watching incredible people.
I enjoyed about my NHS trip.
Yeah, were incredible people doing incredible stuff and just getting on with it. Do you know what I mean? And you just watch them and you go, fucking hell, I envy you, even though I don't envy you. I wouldn't be you, but I wish I was. Do you know what I mean about that? Really stressed out, really long hours. They were talking about their 12-hour shifts and stuff and clearly looked mega stressed, but still just getting the heck on with it. And also that's the time that I've been with the most amount of adults all talking to each other in such a long time. It's really fascinating to be there, and they're all colleagues and going, oh yeah, you know, to watch the football and stuff. I was like, wow, this is just a workplace that is carrying on, albeit in the most insane, intense way for them. So that was nice to be with adults and talk to adults. Really nice, clever, nice people.
Wow. And it's been a less eventful week for me. Can I check in with my theme? Can I tell you what? It's been a thing for me. So we have ticked over since our last recording. We've ticked over into February, and I did a sort of 1 month review, and I was like, do you know what? I don't actually like journaling.
What?
So I stopped.
Really?
Yeah. Because I might come back to it, but so here are my thoughts, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people who can resonate with bits of this. So my journaling was about gratitude and what have I been given and what have I given other people. Now, I have no doubt that when we're back at work, we'll have a myriad of things to think about. And so I'll be able to write more things about shelter and about firewood and about food that I've been, and play cues that have come from, and all that stuff will be there.
Yeah, and relationships with humans that aren't just your kids and your partner.
So what I found was, one, that it was quite difficult to, some days, I mean, in some ways it was good to sort of be stretched and be like, oh, maybe I haven't been given anything today. And then you think for a bit and you're like, no, I have. I've been given this, or I've been given this. So anyway, but the other thing that I found difficult was I was doing it right before I went to bed. And I don't know about you, but my sleep routine is once I go upstairs, my brain goes, you are going to bed now, right? My sleep hygiene, no more jobs. My sleep hygiene is so I might watch one video on my iPad or something, but it's not a time where I have a chat and then we do something else and I think about this. You know, it's you need to go to sleep. And it was basically, the book was sat on my bedside table like a looming job. You can't go to sleep yet. And also doing it at the end of the day, I found quite difficult because if I got to the end of the day and I was like, oh, I was given, say it was a day when I went to the woods and I was like, oh, I was given shelter and I was given firewood and I was given paths to walk on and I was given that little visit from a squirrel. And then I was like, and what have I given other people? Oh, fuck, oh, I don't know. And it's too late to change it then. Whereas I feel like if I had done it, maybe to do it effectively, maybe I need to like not write it down, but have like 3 alarms set in the day to give myself a cue in the morning, in the middle of the day, and when I go to, when I'm winding down, to kind of go, hey, maybe think about it rather than like, it's essentially, I suppose it's the difference between like coursework and end of year exam. You can stuff it all up at the end of your exam and go, I haven't given anyone anything today.
That reminds me, though, the way that you were talking about it reminds me of when we have reflected about reflecting with our groups in the woods, and how we shifted from just an end of the day reflection to doing little mini ones through the day with our groups at snack time, lunchtime, whenever. And that's very similar, isn't it? Because in the same way that we were talking about, if something dramatic and potentially negative has happened in the day, to dredge it all up at the end of the day when it's all been like, moved through, and you haven't got time to repair the relationships and that kind of thing. That's kind of similar to what you're saying, isn't it? I wonder, does it have to be what's the word? Like in some kind of yoga practices that you can do like in the morning, it's like, affirmations, is that right? Or make an intention, make an intention for your day, says Adrienne, the online yoga teacher. Is that different to what you're doing, like an intention?
I guess it would more be like a plan of thinking, oh, one of the gifts I will give today might be, and then it might make me think of like a more elaborate bit of cooking, or it might make me, it would kind of inform it, which I think I'm going to go, that will be my kind of like, what I don't want to do is just be like, I said I would write my journal at the end of the day, and so I must do that even if it's not working, even if I don't like it. It's like, okay, this isn't, just take a bit off and adapt it. How is your old worldy knowledge?
How is my old worldy knowledge? Now you're asking.
I feel like you and I talked a lot about witches this week.
Yes, I have been. Have I talked on the podcast already about the, or told you about the amazing medicine spoon project?
No,
have I told you about that? I'll have to look up the lady's name, but she, I think, is an artist, and she is running the Medicine Spoon project. I'm going to look it up as we're talking. It is the Medicine Spoon Memorial Project, and you can find out more at madeonthemoors.co.uk. And this woman, I think she's called Karen Thompson, she is finding all of the names of women who were persecuted as witches. And she started off with names of women in Scotland. And she, on a piece of white fabric, draws the outline of a spoon, like a medicine spoon, the idea being that these women who were persecuted for witchcraft actually were herbalists, were like early, community doctors almost, or nurses, midwives, who knew about like the free medicine that was available, and therefore like the only medicine that was available for poor people at the time. And she'll send you one of these blank pieces of fabric with the spoon on it and a name of a woman, and she sends it out, and I think you pay £5 to cover postage, and then you decorate it and embellish it however you like, and you can embroider the woman's name on it or write it as a kind of memorial to that woman, and then send it back. And then she's making this amazing kind of artwork with these memorial spoons, and there are just hundreds and hundreds, and that's just in Scotland. She's going to do the British one, the English ones next. So I'm kind of really keen to get involved. But something just struck me quite recently about how at Halloween we like dress up in pointy hats, and our kids are like, oh, I'm a witch, whatever. And actually that's kind of a bit like I'm not saying it's the same as blackface, but it is like just like a really weird thing to do when many people were killed in the most hideous way and persecuted for no reason other than they were the person who was a bit odd, who lived at the end of the road. Or
they were challenging the patriarchy.
Exactly.
When will you learn? When will you learn? No, I'm joking.
Oh, God. So, so I'm really, interested in that. And you've been listening to a podcast about it, is that right?
I listened to the Radio 4 You're Dead to Me podcast I've recently found and went back through, and that was really, really good.
Yeah.
And I said I have interesting thoughts. I find myself feeling defensive whenever anyone talks about like a historical patriarchy, and I'm not sure why I should feel defensive. And I just sort of check that feeling and go like, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? That I feel that, and that I in some way feel guilty, not responsible, but I feel like challenge. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to to experience.
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
But kind of on the subject of challenging things, we said we were talking about a blog this week. A very, I would say, when I say the word blog, what I imagine is like, hey guys, here's my perfect coffee recipe of how to make a mug cake. But this is a serious blog. This is... Do
you mean like one of those blogs with recipes where you Google it and it's one of the things that comes up and you're like, okay, great, this looks like a easy 3-ingredient cookie, and then you have to scroll through the whole person's like life story and the story of their dog and loads of photos and loads of clickbait before you actually get to the recipe, which is like somewhere down the bottom, and you're like, have I got this wrong? Do you mean like that? Yeah
I would actually, do you know what, if there's not because some of them now have a button at the top that says jump to recipe, and if it doesn't have that, I'm like, I'm not reading it, I'm not scrolling, I'm not doing, I don't want to know about your London-based life where you went for a walk and you saw some grass and that was lovely. Like, get on with it.
All the ones I find are American.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
but American, I mean, okay, we've got a lot of American listeners. I'm going to make a massive sweeping statement now. Do you get frustrated when you look, we're going on a tangent already. You look at a blog recipe and it's like how to make like delicious, particularly you and I will look up a lot of obviously vegan recipes. So you look up like delicious pizza dough, 3 ingredients, and I'm like, okay, cool. And you look up ingredient number 1, pre-made pizza dough from your local or it's like special vegan cake. Step 1, get some yellow box cake mix. I'm like, that's not, half the thing has been made. Your ingredients can't be like.
And it's from a thing that I can't get in this country.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yellow box cake mix sounds good.
It sounds great. It sounds like American cooking is like pour a box in, add some oil or some water, and then like in Back to the Future, you just ping and your food is done. I don't know how cooking works over there. Here, we have to grind our own flour. We have to dig in the earth for... No, we don't.
Apart from we make instant cake mix with lemonade over the campfire, that's pretty ping and your food's ready.
That is pretty ping. I was having a test this afternoon and I put a picture on our social media of a cast iron pan vegan brownie, like cook in the pan. And so I made it in my little I've got like a 4-inch cast iron pan. So I made like a personal brownie thing, but I'm up for scaling it up and trying this
Was it good?
Oh, it was incredible.
Was it on the hob? Like on the campfire? What? Like,
you do it over the coals and you just put a lid on it, like on a cast iron pan. But I did it on the hob at home. But yeah, if you're listening, go and look at our social media. Go and look at this brownie. Like it was incredible. It was as good as it looked. We were actually going to talk about a serious blog.
Do you think we're ever going to get around to talking? We've got lots to say about it, okay? It's really important. It is important. It's called What Best Explains Children's Connection with Nature. And it's by Miles Richardson, who I'm ashamed to say I've only just come across. It turns out he's just like some kind of, guru on this whole subject. And I did email him to go, can you please, Mr. Richardson, please can you come on our podcast and talk about it? And he was like, it looks lovely, but no.
Understandably very busy, I'm sure.
Of course. He was like, I get about 20 of these requests every day. And I was like, oh, pants. Okay. God damn you for being so important. And other people knowing who you are. That's annoying. So yeah, he's doing amazing stuff. And he works at the University of Derby and also has his own blog, which is called something else. findingnature.org.uk. And he's on Twitter at Finding Nature. But yeah, so the report that he was involved in compiling with the University of Derby is not open access, annoyingly. So you can't read the full report unless you've got access to, I want to say Sage, but no, Libut, blah, blah. But you can read this blog where he sort of skims over the main findings, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's like slightly more than you would get in an abstract.
Yeah.
But yeah, very good for obviously tempting you in to go, oh, that looks good. Maybe I'll go and look at it. Some things very interesting, some things a little bit challenging to what we do, some things that kind of confirm what we know as practitioners. I'm just going to look at because I made notes, guys. I made notes for
better than me this week.
So the first thing that I made note of was like the surprising thing was that number of nature visits were not correlated to nature connectedness.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to backtrack in a way. So that it was like they did an NCI, so a nature connectedness index, where they made up this measure of how you could decide who was, 4 points connected to nature, who was 10 points connected to nature, which is a completely separate study. Is quite interesting, but from the findings of that, for using that NCI, the number of nature visits not related to nature connectedness, that kind of struck me as just an interesting thing, isn't it? That it's not volume, it seems to be quality, not quantity.
Yeah, but even that. So it says about sort of higher levels of neighbourhood green space were related to lower levels of nature connectedness, and also neighbourhood deprivation was positively associated with children's nature connectedness.
Yes. Now, I had some thoughts about interpreting that. Would you like me to wildly speculate?
Go for it. So
I was thinking about how do you define green space? Because I think that's an interesting thing. So green space, and a lot of what can be considered green space is like farmland can be considered green space. So green space is different to accessible nature.
Yeah.
So I would say in lots of our country, because of the way, so you've been reading a different book about how Britain has its kind of landowning laws. We're a very litigious, historically, a very litigious and landowning nation. And our right to roam and our freedom of access is one of the lowest in Europe, if not in the world. So looking out my window now, I can see green space everywhere, but I can't access it. So I wondered if this study, sort of whether that was one of the holes in it, was being, children in the countryside might have green space all around them. But you if the woods that you can actually go to is a car journey away, because things in the countryside are spread out, then that is going to negatively affect your nature connectedness. Whereas being in an urban environment, it's more conscious about putting green space within reach of everybody, or to some extent, someone in an office is measuring, that block of flats will be a 10-minute walk from that bit of green space, or will be a 8-minute walk, which just doesn't happen in the countryside. It's kind of taken for granted of like, it's a big old village in the middle of fields, it'll be fine.
Yeah. And also I wonder if there's a thing about like how you define nature connectedness. So I think in order to look properly at the nature connectedness index, you'd have to read the whole study. But if you think about, like you're saying, looking at a green field full of crops or cows is going to score you a lower nature connectedness level than interacting with some ants for a long time, crawling along the concrete in a park. Do you know what I mean? That's like a different thing, isn't it? So we might automatically expect nature connection to be about wide open green space. But actually, if you're looking at linking with other species, about biophilia, then that can be, as you say, like a small back garden or a play area or a car park or a playground. Yeah.
And it probably feeds into, for a lot of children, where nature connectedness it's such a hard word to say for me. Nature connectedness is probably lower for the generation of children coming through school now than it was for children in, say, the 50s, right? Broadly speaking.
Yeah.
We know this from studies about how far did children roam. We know this from, how much unsupervised time do children have, etc., etc. So if you take that, you now have a generation of children who have a lower nature connectedness than other generations have had before them. Is it a case of meeting them where they are, in terms of connections, is better suited to an environment where there are one or two types of trees and one or two types of shrubs because it's been intentionally put that way, rather than an overwhelming, nothing. Sometimes I see children come to our sessions who can't name any trees. They don't know any tree names. They don't know any plant names. And you get them in the woods and it's like absolute overload. Like it all just becomes noise of like, well, there's just green things, aren't there? It's all just wood, or it's all mud, or it's all flower. It just gets grouped.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's like overwhelming.
Whereas maybe seeing ants on the pavement is so isolated that you can build a connection quicker.
Yeah.
You can have that connection that you can't go, the example I always think of is like trying when you sort of any sort of bird song activities with kids is quite difficult if there's more than one bird singing in your environment.
Yeah.
It quite literally becomes noise, and you go, can you hear the thing that sounds a bit like this, but maybe like this, but maybe they're going, and they're going, no, because there's 95 birds singing right now, Lewis. What are you,
Yeah, absolutely. I was interested in the part about neighbourhood deprivation being positively associated with nature connectedness. And then they're kind of speculated in saying that other researchers found that children in more deprived neighbourhoods spend more time outdoors with friends, maybe engaging with nature or making dens or collecting the natural objects they find. So I can completely imagine that being the case, and thinking about, where housing is more densely packed and people might know their neighbours a bit better, and you might have more children of a similar age living in close proximity together in a town, that families are kind of more chilled out about their kids roaming around together in the park, maybe even where the parents can see them out of the window, but they're there all day, and that you're more likely as a child to engage and really connect with nature when you're in a small group of friends than you are when you're being briskly walked through some beautiful, glorious countryside with your middle-class parents. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the real nature connection, as opposed to the thing that we might imagine about just like, oh, nature connection is like visiting National Trust properties. Actually, is it really? Because if you think about the way that children develop and learn through play, they don't get much time to play freely and with other children that aren't in their family on your average middle-class family walk. And so you could argue that actually Forest School does support that kind of finding, in terms of it being a bunch of kids in one place for a longer period of time where they really properly can engage. And that's the kind of route in to nature connection, rather than a more superficial level. There was sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say that makes me kind of wonder whether it's something to do with how nature is presented. So you might have children who are at, particularly here, say private schools, might go on more nature connected, nature themed activities, more walks, more school trips out, things like that. But if their experience is like a didactic approach to nature, you should appreciate this. Don't do that because you need to focus on the leaf rubbing. You need to do, get your head down.
Exactly. Yeah, we're doing this study right now. Yeah.
It kind of kills that awe and wonder, Whereas experiencing it experiencing like with your peers and sort of discovering things as your interest comes on and doing that sort of child-led nature connection, that's an interesting thing that they haven't talked about, is whether the nature connection is child-led or didactic, which I think could have a massive impact one way or the other.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to that thing about like pulling legs off spiders and, pouring water on anthills and seeing what happens. And that isn't, you always need as a child, you need the freedom to be able to experiment with nature in that way in order to connect with it, in order to understand it, pull it apart, go, oh God, I now have emotions about that. And now I care about it. The interesting bit about children in more deprived areas tending to spend less time using smartphones, which is predictive of greater nature connectedness. And I've enrolled on a free course at the University of Derby, which I've only just started it, but I would recommend if people are up for it. And if you look at this article, I'll try and put the link in the show notes, but there's quite a lot about smartphone stuff in there, which is quite depressing. And there does seem to be great links between the amount of time spent on smartphones and smartphone addiction and a lower nature connection index.
That's very kind of zeitgeisty at the moment, isn't it? I think a lot of people are maybe waking up is the term to what smartphones are and what they're actually doing to us. In more than just the short term. There's a paragraph here that I was thinking about, which is, so they found that one of the greatest indicators for nature connectedness in children was time spent or proximity to a nature connected adult, or an adult with high nature connection, which is interesting from 2 points. One, that they possibly, again, it's behind a paywall and I don't know the ins and outs of the study, so it would have been interesting to see if they had done I don't know what you would call it, like some sort of check to see, like, is it just a nature connected adult or is it a nature connected peer? Does a nature connected peer have the same impact on you as a nature connected adult?
Well, from the study, it says it's quite specific, and it says the most important predictor of children's nature connectedness is having an adult with high nature connectedness in the same household, is their finding from this particular study. So it doesn't really go into detail about whether that's a peer. It's more like in the same household.
I think that's what I mean is they obviously can test for how nature connected are the adults in your household, whether they asked the children, how nature connected do you think your friends are, or even took a group of children, I don't know even whether they tested for that. Is that the right way? Surveyed for that? Screened for that. There we go. But anyway, so if we take that as a kind of a standing thing, we have found that, or this study has found that adults with a higher nature connection lead to more nature connected children. That makes me wonder then, and it kind of brings up a thing that I was thinking a lot about when we hit our first lockdown in March last year. Jesus, what a time. It's a year gone. There were lots of resources going out because everybody was worried about the children losing sort of outdoor learning, and lots of people making resources for homeschooling that were like, take your children out and notice this, or take your children out and do this study. And one of the things that struck me when I was watching those things is like, we've talked before about you have like a teaching persona, you have like a leader persona that you go, I'm not 100% honest. I have some sort of, a bit of this is acting, you know what I mean? But whether you can do that with nature connection, because nature is so awe and wonder and so broad that if you're genuinely not interested in it, can you take children out and do a bug hunt? If the only things you know are the 3 facts about ladybirds that are on this printout you've got, and you have no further interest in it as an adult, can you actually lead that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what the study's saying in terms of like two things. One, that I don't know if it's in the study or on the course that I've started. It's kind of arguing that the level of nature connectedness in some places I think is beginning to be, but should be worldwide on the kind of index of well-being and happiness. They think it's so fundamental to us as humans to being happy that they think it's got to be added to the, the social, economic, all of those kind of factors in terms of assessing well-being and having a good life. So there's that. And if we become more aware of that, then we as parents, as adults that work with young people in whatever context, kind of see the priority in that. So in the same way as if you were kind of being a good and responsible parent or youth worker or whatever, you wouldn't go, oh, I find maths really hideous. I hate maths. Therefore, I'm not going to ever talk about maths with this young person ever. You kind of put a brave face on it if you hate maths and go, oh, yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's find out about this together, and don't, try to terrify the child with your own hideous story of your scary maths teacher. I'm not speaking from experience here at all.
Of course not.
Then you might go, okay, I really find slugs absolutely disgusting, but I'm going to hide that hatred because I know that nature connectedness is really important for your life as a child and your outcomes later on. I'm going to kind of hide that and make it a priority. So I think maybe if these findings become more well known, then more adults will have that feeling. But also the study kind of says that at the moment even when we do accept that nature connectedness is really important both for humans and for like the future of the planet, because if you don't know about it and care about it, then how are you going to look after it when you're an adult and you can make decisions about these things? Then all of the kind of like interventions, as it were, or projects have been aimed at children and have been through schools perhaps, or those kind of things. It's like, oh yeah, get children outside, but actually we need to be targeting parents and families, and that's what we need to do. And it's not just about it's a bit like how I always find it weird when schools really talk about healthy eating with children and how to what makes a healthy plate and how to cook properly and stuff. It's like you're telling like a 7-year-old this, but they've got no control over what they eat,
They've got less control, haven't they? I guess the dream is that the 7-year-old goes home and goes, "Mommy, we should eat more carrots. I love carrots." But
that's just putting so much pressure like on the kid. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like almost kind of making like guilt shaming them or somehow, do you know what I mean? Like worrying. And they go home and they have just got a plate of waffles because that's what was on special for this week. Like that's not fixing the problem, is it? I mean, I could go on for bloody ages about food poverty and calories and shit. But that's maybe another topic. But yeah, I found that's a kind of total shift in the way of looking at it, isn't it? In terms of, and it really made me remember times with our parent and toddler groups or family groups that we've done. And those moments of nature connectedness with the adults and all those things which you talked about in the podcast before, about the adults kind of going, oh, this is actually like really eye-opening because I joined this group for my child, but actually I'm getting loads of that out of it. Or am I supposed to join in? Says the adult. It's like, of course you are. Like, this isn't just for the children, this is for you as well. And now we've kind of got this evidence to sort of back that up and go, this is actually really critically important. And I was just remembering, again, this study brought up that memory of, I don't know if you remember, there was one session that we did with some adults and toddlers. And it was kind of like a bug hunt, but it was more like mindfulness. We basically got them we gave them magnifying glasses. We said, just like sit on the floor. I think it was summer, or the weather was all right anyway. And just from where you are, take a trowel and a magnifying glass and just sit down and just like stare at the ground and maybe move a bit of soil around, move a bit of a leaf around, move a twig, and just have a look. And some adults stayed there for ages. And then I remember speaking to this one parent, and she kind of like came up, like looked up, and her eyes just looked different. She was just like, wow, that's actually really amazing, isn't it? I just saw loads of stuff and I just didn't know what it was. And I just like focused, like looked at the ground for ages. And I was like, the study made me remember that moment. I was like, well, that is like a nature connectedness moment, isn't it? It's that kind of stuff. It's not, as you're talking about, having a like, oh, what an amazing, beautiful view, or oh, I've seen a very rare animal. It is just going, well, this is the soil I walk on all the time, and there's all this stuff like living
Awe
here.
and wonder, man. It's awe and wonder. It's
Oh my
all awe and
God.
wonder. It makes
Just
me
some
think
like
about
stuff.
we've had a couple of parents at sort of parent toddler groups or at family sessions who have more or less explicitly said, the kids are already great outside. This is for me. I'm here because I don't want to pass on that anxiety. Or and I can think, we've got some parents who have come and are now coming with their second child.
Yeah.
Because they were just kind of like, well, this is for me. It started being like, well, let's get the kid involved, and now it's for me. And now I'm, they sometimes sort of go, hey, did you see me doing that? And it's like they're, a kid again going, Lewis, did you see me doing that?
Yeah.
I never would have done that before. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Look at what, just so self-motivated and intrinsically motivated. I guess that's the thing is, I wonder whether I remember as a child going around lots of, like my parents were like, I think they might have been National Trust members or similar. And I don't know if you did this, you go around like stately homes and they would give you like a cork clipboard with a sheet on it. And it was like, questions like, how many of the statues are wearing crowns? How many of the doors have lion door knockers? And as you go, it's sort of so that the parents can have a walk. And as a kid, you've got something to be occupied with. And now, we do sort of similar things with like geocaching but I wonder, do those things in any way connect you to nature? Because the reward from memory was always like a couple of sweets at the end, or like a little, there was an external reward. So when you're going around, you're not actually engaging with the environment, you're just going, I've got to fill this all out because otherwise. And then you get to the end and the lady behind the gift shop till would just kind of go, oh well, you've got most of them, that's very good, and we'll give you it anyway. And
that's our family every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I'm still looking at this bit of the study that's like the counterintuitive findings about the children from higher income households and lower income households, because the higher income families spend more time visiting nature, but there's no relationship found between nature visits and nature connectedness. It's just so interesting.
Well, I had a thought about that, which is very broad. Would you like to hear my very broad thought?
Yes, please.
So I wonder, particularly in the UK, we have more of a, we talk a lot about like social mobility, but we've still got a class system, let's be honest. And I think there would have been a thing where a bit like we were, so it kind of links to what we were talking earlier about people being accused of witchcraft would have been very strong in like herb law, because they would have been poorer people. They would have needed to get medicine from the woods, from the shared land. And I wonder if there's something to do with, if you are connected in a way where, I'm going to try and phrase this very intentionally, if raspberries on the side of blackberries from a bit of a hedge are a significant source of food, or are like a significant joy in your life, because you're not a family that can afford to buy blackberries from the supermarket every week. So blackberries being found is a genuine joy. That will impact how you relate to those things. Bit like the marshmallow test. If you're a child who knows that there's loads of marshmallows at home, can do whatever else, then you're not as tempted by that marshmallow. That's kind of what that study found. More well-off children can resist that thing. So similarly with nature connection, and that thing about, I'm going on lots of tangents, but my brain is firing quite quickly. Children who have grown up in like war zones or abusive families, like make better soldiers because they have like a heightened sense of awareness. They know what they're looking for. They apparently have a better sense of like, someone is moving in a weird way. That person's gait is wrong. So similarly, does it stand then that if blackberries are a significant source of joy or food, or let's say mushrooms are, or actually having shelter or firewood, or, you know, you spin these things out, if that's significant in your life, your brain is wired to pay more attention to it, therefore your nature connection grows, therefore, you know, it spirals that way.
Yes, and what about passing that on genetically? I'm just thinking.
I was going to say that, but that's kind of more it's quite left field, passing it on genetically.
It isn't, isn't it? Because it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying about, you know, childhood trauma or whatever, and that changing your personality, but then that actually being passed on to your offspring. Oh, what is it called though? Epigenetics. So maybe there is something in that idea, and this is pretty, as you say, left field, of people who did rely on the land for their sustenance, passing that on epigenetically through the generations. So maybe those of us who do just seem to have magically had a higher level of nature connection, maybe it is passed down through our ancestors in terms of that awareness of the outdoors.
And I think it's important to say that, like, when you're talking about this epigenetic stuff, that's not to say that this stuff can't be learned or it can't be, you know, we're not saying,
of course,
if your family are from if you can go on Who Do You Think You Are and you can trace back a very posh family line, you're never going to be connected. It's just about saying possibly people's brains are naturally wired in different ways, and being in a lower social class, therefore more reliant on common land, on hedgerow foraging, on communal firewood, those sorts of things stay with you.
There's a bit in this blog that talks about whether nature connected parents do different things with their families when they are at a green space, and they kind of predict that they do, given that that's the biggest predictor of children's nature connection. So what kind of things are nature connected adults doing in a green space with young people that instills that nature connection within the child? And you kind of think about that as a forest school leader, don't you, in terms of you are a model, you're modeling the way you react to things in the environment all the time. And and you don't have to like fake that, you just have it, otherwise you wouldn't be doing the job you're doing. But that's the kind of thing that maybe is rubbing off on the child. It's the way you react when you see some slime mold or whatever, and that maybe that is what nature connected parents do. But also they could be doing things like you described, like foraging. So rather than we're just on a walk and we'll just walk and we've got some really nice chocolatey snack bars in our bag which we're going to eat, we're going to, not through necessarily need, but we can eat these, let's eat them, and all those kinds of things. Or having little stories to tell about the things that you're seeing that engage the children, all the kind of stuff that you might do if you're a good forest school leader.
Do you think, sorry to cut across you, do you think that forest school in some way mimics being a historically lower class, in that, let me back it up, in that the consequence for letting the wood get wet is that we genuinely can't make a fire. We can't, for the most part, if you want hot chocolate at forest school, you need, we need to get a fire going. We've talked before about there being sort of natural consequences for a natural chains of events that you can't fake. And that's one of the things that it's just sort of crystallizing for me now, that when I do see some settings that are maybe linked, like an earlier setting that might be an indoor-outdoor one, and the fire doesn't quite work, so they just go in and they use the staff kitchen and they boil some water in the kettle and then they bring it out. And on one hand you can go, you're just meeting the children's needs, you're just getting those things, but the other way, are you losing something in terms of nature connection because you're not getting a cause and response? And where the forest school kind of, I'm thinking about all the children that come and the children that come to our groups come from a lot of different economic backgrounds. But at forest school, we're all in the same boat. When it rains on everybody. When it is windy and cold, it's windy and cold for everybody. Do you know?
Yeah.
So previous podcast guest Andy Smith is on the 15th of March is running a virtual event called Supporting Autistic People in the Right Way with his company Spectrum Gaming. It looks to be a really good event. Loads of speakers. Michael James is speaking, who's the author of Forest School and Autism. Lots of other speakers in there, and kind of really bringing in that saying of nothing about us without us, which is a way of saying if you want to improve your facilities or your sessions for autistic people, then you need to be listening to autistic people. And one of the things I think is really good about this event is that Andy has involved some young autistic people to have their voice involved in the conversation and to have their voice kind of come through. I'm going to be attending, and I think it would just be a really good event for anybody who wants to involve the autistic community more in their sessions. So we will put the links in our show notes. So just again, the event is Supporting Autistic People in the Right Way. It's by Spectrum Gaming. It's on the 15th of March.
And all of the money generated from the ticket goes directly to supporting autistic young people.
It does.
Which is also great.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes, it definitely harkens back to the past, doesn't it? And there's definitely something really like socially historical about Forest School, I think.
Yeah.
Would you say that your parents were very nature connected?
No, but I think my grandparents, particularly on my dad's side, were very, we used to go ferreting and put ferrets down rabbit holes and we had to put all the nets on the holes. Do you know about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of vaguely. Not
okay,
really.
So for people that don't know,
go into detail.
It's the practice where you work out where a rabbit warren is and you put sort of nets over all the entrances that you can see, except for one, and then you put a ferret down that one hole and then you cover that one with a net, and the ferret sort of runs around, freaks the rabbits out. Rabbits go hell for leather and they basically run into a net at the opening and then rabbit pie. So we would do stuff like that.
So you used to do that with your parents?
I did it once, I think once or twice. It wasn't like that's what we do every week. But I remember foraging in terms of like for fruit and possibly I'm going to call it scrumping rather than stealing. For apples and stuff. And just in terms of location, my granddad grew up in a village, you'll probably know it, Litchett. And Litchett Travers, right? This is how we talk down in Litchett Travers.
Is that the village of murders?
Well,
it is the village of murders, isn't it? There's been some freaky murders there.
Yes.
It's in a beautiful part of the world, though.
Right.
It's amazing.
Let's dissociate my grandparents from the village of murders if we can. My granddad did not leave the borders of that village until he was, I think, 10, and they got on a bus, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of him knowing his locality, he would have known that place inside and out. But in terms of my family, no, I don't think we were. I would say we were more of a Center Parcs, that kind of nature. Like, we'll go for a lovely bike ride.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Through the thing,
so you think it skipped a generation?
I think it got slightly sanitized with my parents because they did economically better than their parents did. And so that was the thing. And it was the 90s, man. What were we doing in the 90s?
Just buying loads of stuff, buying shit. And
What about you? Do you think your
games.
family, I mean, you've talked about your, I'm going to call them excursions in the woods.
Yes, very, very. If you're looking at a kind of, on a graph of, averageness to very high, then, and I've only really thought about this since reading this study, actually, and thinking about the kind of real nature connectedness rather than time outdoors or going to fancy places in different locations and stuff.
Yeah.
They both spent every day of their childhood that they could outdoors. My mum basically lived in the garden for a while. And yeah, my dad grew up next door to a farm. We'd like rented a house, so they weren't farmers, but they lived on this farm. Right. And he had a very nature connected adult who kind of like mentored him and was really into birds. So not only did he kind of try and pass that on to us, but he told us all the stories about his own childhood and about getting up at dawn and doing dawn chorus thing and, you know, birding with this bloke. And yeah, my mum just knows loads about wildflowers and plants and butterflies, and she doesn't necessarily do that much foraging or anything. She's like, it's not very trendy, her nature connection, if you know what I mean. And she still is, you know, and she'll spend all her time that she can on her allotment, which she grows, you know, she basically runs it for wildlife as well as growing stuff. So yeah, and especially my dad was just still full of awe and wonder about it all. He was just like, this is amazing, isn't it? Just all the time, you know. And I kind of sort of remember getting to a certain age and him going, oh, shall we get up and do a dawn chorus walk, just you and me, because, you know, you're old enough to get up at 4:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock now. And feeling like really privileged to be doing that and it being really special and exciting.
How old do you think you were at that point?
I think I was probably 7 or 8.
Okay.
Maybe 9 actually.
Well, 9 would tie in very interestingly with there's a paragraph in here. I was waiting to see when we could get to it because I find it really interesting about the teenage dip. In nature connectedness, with levels dropping by up to 30% from age 9 to 15. So that kind of, once we're getting into double digits, and I find that interesting because in the UK, forest school is, I would say, very popular in early years. It's become a lot more popular in primary school, but I would still say there's an interesting kind of, and it's more of a systematic thing rather than a attitudes thing. I think one of the things about forest school is that when you get to secondary school, subjects become quite segregated, whereas forest school being holistic in nature means that it can't be in lieu of geography and it can't be in lieu of science and it can't be in lieu of, so you've got to find somewhere to fit it into that
which is usually a kind of like intervention scheme of some kind, isn't it? It's for the kids who are struggling academically or emotionally or behaviourally, and so we'll whip you out of modern foreign languages and put you in a nurture group, and we'll do that outdoors. That tends to be what I've experienced with forest school and secondary.
But it's kind of interesting, isn't it, to think that if we're following this research, then either we are as a kind of society nailing nature connection in early years and primary education, or you could look at it and go, young children are already nature connected. They already find bugs and wildlife interesting, and they already love to climb trees. We just sort of have to let them do it. What actually needs some active work and some push, you know, some real kind of energy behind is this kind of preteen to teenage thing. It's sort of where we're going, okay, well, that's the point where it all drops off. So that's where the groups need to be focused, you know?
I'd be interested to know more detail about the study there in terms of when that started. Like, has that always been the case? Obviously, they haven't been doing this nature connection survey for, since the 50s or whatever. But is that since records began, it's always shown that trend, or is that increasing, or what? Because that would correlate with smartphone use, wouldn't it? Definitely, which we know lowers nature connection. Also, in terms of the way that we're kind of wired as humans, you might sort of argue that at that time of life, you are looking, instead of understanding the kind of environment and the world around you, you're kind of honing in on like social relationships, and that's your kind of learning focus. not intentionally, but just that's what that's your driver, is like, okay, what tribe do I belong in? Who are my real friends? What does friendship mean? What do relationships mean? All those kind of things. And those kind of things that our brains might be geared towards are more supported with smartphone use, aren't they? That is the absolute, like, I'm putting my hands together in a kind of interlocked way, the smartphones and that drive for social interaction and belonging. In which case, how would you design a program for prioritizing nature connection for that age group? Like, is it for a school, or is it something a little bit different?
Well, I've kind of always looked at that kind of thing as because the need for social engagement is so strong at that age, that it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of, like, children then go wherever children are. So when everybody was out in the road playing football, then you would fulfill that need to socialize by going out into the road or by going into the woods and seeing your friends there. But now that you can, but then that limits who you can socialize with, because you can only socialize with the people that are there at that time, which is a whole nother thing about kind of transitory nature and the sort of being in the moment. Because the flip side is that you can stay at home and you can communicate with 300 people from your bedroom. And if you have a strong social desire, do you go to the woods and do quality with 5 or 6 friends? Do you stay at home and do quantity with your favorite YouTubers?
Yeah, and also I'm just thinking about it, the way that you behave around other children changes, right? Because when you're a kid, you're playing, and you are playing in that free play, whatever bonkers thing happens. And through that, we go, oh, there are slugs in this place where I'm doing my bonkers idea. I say bonkers in that really affectionate, I love play way, obviously. Whereas when you're 14, you're not going to be doing that. Like, you don't play anymore. You play in that different way. So you can't necessarily expect a bunch of 14-year-olds to, like, say 14-year-olds in the woods to engage with nature in the same way as a bunch of 9-year-olds or 3-year-olds.
So I'm just reading some stuff which I find, I'm actually going on a kind of slight wiki hole as we are talking. So I was looking at this study, as you were asking when was that data taken. So it was a one-off snapshot of people from 9 to I think from 7 up to 95. And they asked, and they scored all of these people in one snapshot of how nature connected they are, and then sort of put them all in a line. And the 13 to 15 group is the lowest group by far, which I'm then looking.
And it goes up again,
and then it slowly comes up again. Further down in this article, they're then saying about how drop-in nature connection cannot be solely addressed by occasional educational programs, though. Given the climate emergency, the solution needs to be a core and everyday topic delivered within greener school grounds. And then it has a hyperlink here, designed to create habitats for connection, which I was really then interested in thinking about how a green space is designed at school. And they, in my head, they're either designed for completely flat so that we can play a large ball game, rugby, football, something like anything like that. But they're not really designed for, if we think about how do we design spaces at Forest School for connection, it's little hidey holes. It's spaces where you can feel sort of secluded. It's spaces where you can move from one area to another. We talk about, if you look at the Opal sort of guidelines, they talk about having an activity and then the journey to the next activity being an activity in itself, being logs to
or like a location. Between locations, like
it's journeys. Not just a flat fun journeys. That's a good way. And if I think back to all of the schools and playgrounds and outdoor areas that I have seen, the woodlands that schools have got, or if they're lucky enough to have a woodland, are amazing for that, but they're often not allowed to use that during break and lunchtime. And the areas that they are allowed to use, particularly my experience of secondary schools, both as a student and as a teacher, is like wide, flat, open space. If you want to sit down somewhere, sit in the middle of the grass or sit on the edge of the grass,
And it's all about supervision as well, isn't it? It's about, like, you know, you don't want
absolutely.
little hidey holes where people can be bullied or get up to mischief.
You don't want to trust the children.
You don't want to trust those children because, you know, they'll betray that trust in a second, you know.
Yeah.
And heaven forfend you have more people supervising at those times, because that's when people need the most support.
Or even just, you know, I mean, we could go off on a whole tangent about unsupervised time and how important that is, and character defining and all these things. But there is something, isn't there, about if the need for connection is strongest in the same age group that is having a dip in nature connectedness, then we need to think about how can we facilitate both of those needs at the same time. How can you meet nature connection? How can you meet social engagement through nature connection or alongside nature connection?
I was also just thinking about children's mental health and what the kind of situation is in terms of which age groups are really struggling at the moment, and whether there's a correlation there as well between sort of mental health issues in that age group, and therefore nature connection being even more important to prioritise for those young people in terms of supporting their mental health, and how you might go about that. I was thinking about my own childhood at that point and thinking about, okay, so was I nature connected 13 to 15? And I do remember really getting a lot out of, there was like a local group, they were like a wildlife group or local history group or something, who found this old abandoned mill in the countryside near where I lived, and they decided to restore it. And so they asked for volunteers to do bramble bashing, for clearing loads of litter out of the watercourse, all that kind of stuff, and, you know, habitat building and things like that. And I bloody love that. And we did that kind of maybe 3 or 4 weekends, you know, on a Saturday all day. And that was really fulfilling in a different way to the way that I might have just gone out and free played in the fields and hedges when I was younger. That kind of thing of working in a group with other people my age. And it wasn't like a youth project, it was just families. So there were couple of kids my age.
It was just a chain gang, wasn't it? This was when you were in there.
Yeah, exactly. Child labour. No, there were adults there, loads of adults that I'd never met before, younger children my age, and it was a kind of community event. And there's no doubt that did support nature connection for everybody involved, because you're giving back, you're doing that thing of going, oh yeah, you know. And I think we had there was one person who really knew what they were doing, and we're going, okay, the reason we're doing this is because blah, if we change this habitat, these are the species that are going to grow or live here. So you had that awareness while you were working. So I think that supported it. Being in Venture Scouts, well, that was a bit older actually. I guess I started that when I was 15, 16. So maybe a little bit older, but that definitely supported it. But it's like a different thing. Do you know what I mean? If you were going to try and engage 13 to 15-year-olds with nature, maybe there needs to be, I don't know.
Yeah. It's that would be my kind of my closing thoughts on this blog is like, I'm really interested to see what different organizations can do with this information and this kind of, because they're pulling a lot of studies together here to kind of make one sort of point, which I guess is the idea of academic research in general, isn't it? But I'm interested to see who uses this blog and who uses this study to inform their groups and activities going forwards. You know, I think it could be very interesting to see what's done with this information.
Yeah. In terms of forest school, it kind of has made me reevaluate, as I said, having those memories of the moments with our adult and toddler groups, and reevaluate the importance of those, because I think probably on the one hand, for a lot of forest school folk, that might be the kind of thing you start with, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it also definitely one of the things that makes the least money. So one might be tempted to go, oh, okay, well, you know, that's the thing that's maybe, I don't know, it's a short period of time, isn't it? It's not like an all day thing. It's not like a holiday club. It's not going to put in necessarily as much money, or maybe you might kind of dismiss it slightly in terms of its possibility to offer nature connection, because it's generally 2 hours at the most, isn't it, when you've got little kids in the woods with their folks, their adults, but kind of making you reevaluate that and go, actually no, that is really important. And those moments of adult nature connection, even if somebody only comes for a few months, could have a huge impact on that adult's life and therefore that child's life, and make them see nature in a different way.
Actually, saying that is kind of it's linked something in my head, which is a topic that comes up a lot in forest school, and I think may even have been the topic of our very first podcast.
Adults in forest school.
Adults in forest. Well, yeah, which seems absolutely ages ago now. But if I think about, so if I now look at this and go, okay, the best thing I can do for nature connection for my group. Let's say I'm arriving in a school, and I'm going, right, nature connection is my goal here with this group of children. And you get that thing that lots of people will have experienced, which is where you have an assistant or a teacher that comes out, or a TA that comes out, and they are not nature connected. And people kind of go, oh, how can I involve this person? How can I get them to kind of follow what I'm going for? How can I do it? But it'd be very interested, wouldn't it, if you reframed that in your head into how can I turn that teacher, or how can I turn that TA into a nature connected adult? What can I do to spark awe and wonder in that person so that they can then just go off on their own?
That reframes it totally, doesn't it?
So that you're not going, how do I yank them into line with me? It's how do I get them to be a nature connected adult?
Yeah, or how do I get away with doing what I want to do with the kids despite that adult?
How do I occupy them with something amazing so they can piss off over there and I can do but do you know what I mean? That is an interesting reframing, isn't it? To kind of think, if we're talking about parents at a parent-toddler group, thinking, okay, any adult that comes, if a parent comes to your school group session, if a TA comes to your school group session, they are in some ways as much of a linchpin as you are now, because they can either massively help or they can undermine what's going on. Cool. Well, I think we'll leave that one there. We've waffled successfully about that. I
really enjoyed that though, man. I had a real geek out. I really enjoyed that.
Deep. Okay, right. We'll see everybody next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.